So guys, since today is the first session, I'm going to explain you the structure of the CCNA exam and exactly what is going to be covered into the blueprint of CCNA exam, and also what is the structure of this course, how exactly we are going to go step by step, week by week, because it's a special accelerated version 2.0 for CCNA we have created, which will actually continue non-stop after this with CCNP, NRC, then CCNP ENCOR, and then going for the CCIE accelerated as well, with much more hands-on approach and making sure that we actually go step by step, making all the topics as easy as possible, but also going in depth so that we have more knowledge than we need for the exam level. So we always call them the plus kind of courses like CCNA plus or CCNP plus, because we always go a little bit more than you need for the exam. So you get more confidence and you become more comfortable with the technology as well, right? So the actual topics will start from next week. So for today, first of all, let's understand exactly how this course is going to help you to achieve your knowledge level for CCN and then later for CCNP and CCIE as well. And also how exactly are we going to do the practicals, what is the structure of the theory plus the lab and all these things, right? So let me share my screen and let's get started. So let me know once you guys can see the screen.
I can see it.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the confirmation.
Yes, I can see it.
Thanks.
Sure, thanks.
Thanks for the update. So, welcome again to the CCNA Live Accelerated Bootcamp class. My name is Arpit Pandit. I will be your instructor for the whole duration of this class and then later also for CCNP and CCIE. So, before I get to the structure of this course, when Christian and I were designing this course, we were thinking, okay, what exactly is missing in most of the courses that you see outside in the bootcamp style courses. So, when we think of the bootcamp, we want to get more knowledge but not want to go very slow, but also we don't want to go very fast. What we saw is that most of the boot camps were like 5 days boot camps for CCNA, where they go 8 hours or 10 hours every day, bombarding you with a lots and lots of information every single day. Although CCNA is an entry level certification, people think, but there is a lot of information there in the switching, routing, security, services, and that becomes a lot if you just do it very quickly like this in 5 days or 7 days boot camps. And what happens is that you don't get much time to grasp it properly and to do the practicals and have your own doubts and questions and then get them answered. You don't get all that time. So we decided to create a course which is for CCNA, which is going to be 8 weeks. And in this course, every week we are going to go through some topics, like we start with switching and then routing, then security, IP services. And what we wanted to achieve is that we go in depth in the theory part, and then of course we back it up with the proper lab configuration as well. So anytime you learn something and you can actually immediately do the hands-on with that, it solidifies your understanding of the topic, right? Also, when we have this course structure week by week, you get enough time to repeat the configuration, whatever the topics you learn that week yourself. And we will be providing you all the infrastructure to make sure that you can do all the configurations, practicals, labs on your own laptop or PC as well. So you don't need to wait for the rack rentals, or not limited to a particular time only when you can practice. You can practice anytime during the week, any number of times during the week, and actually have your own doubts which can be cleared, because we also have the Q&A support, so you can ask questions, get them answered. There is another important thing that we wanted to include into this course, so that it becomes a complete solution. You get the in-depth theory, backed by proper configuration labs, and then also backed by the support. And to top all of it up, we have the recordings available for these courses, which will be available to you for lifetime. So that was the objective of creating this course. So let's see exactly how exactly we are going to go through week by week, what will be the structure, and how can you benefit from this course to gain your CCNA certification. And then, of course, going forward, we'll continue to go with CCNP later with ENARSI and ENCOR and CCIE as well. So talking about CCNA itself, the first part, if you see the structure of this live accelerated bootcamp, so this course is going to be once a week. So for the next 8 weeks, we are going to meet every week with some certain topics that we are going to cover. And the session timing will be 2 hours per session every week. And I always say this in my all my classes that these classes are topic driven classes, not time driven classes. So it depends on which topic we are taking that week. It might go slightly more than 2 hours, or it might actually finish even before 2 hours as well, depending on the topic that we are covering that week, right? So it's always on the number of topics and based on their labs instead of very strict 2 hours policy. So it's not time driven; it is topic driven. And in these 2 hours, when we meet every week, I am going to explain you the concepts and then showing you the lab configuration. So I have been a trainer for more than 18 years. And what I really like to do is to make sure that I break the complex topics into easier and understandable chunks and parts so that you can understand exactly how the things work. And then, of course, we see this in the configuration as well to see exactly the implementation of it, right? So that's why anytime I am explaining a new topic to anyone, I always break it into three questions. What, why, and how. So let's say if you are starting STP or spanning tree protocol, so I need to explain you what is STP. So it's a loop prevention mechanism. Just to give you an example, right? Of course, we'll do STP in detail later. But the what is the technology, the definition of it. But then the most important question is why? Why do we need this technology? What problem is it exactly solving? So that we need to use it in our CCNA journey or in our networking journey. So when the why is clear, your brain naturally becomes interested into learning. Okay, now I understand why we need this. So let's see how to configure it. Instead of directly jumping to the question of how, where I start showing you the configuration, how STP is configured, how you can tweak it, how can you change the root bridge, how can you change the port cost or port priority. All these things only matter if your brain already knows why do I need this, right? What is the problem we have in the networking in current world, and how STP is eliminating or helping to eliminate that problem. So that's why I always break this down into three parts, and that actually applies to any other topic as well. So for example, if we are talking about security access control list, so what is ACL? ACL is just like a security guard on the door, which will not allow anyone to go in or out without properly checking a list of people who are allowed or a list of people who are denied, so that you have security on your routers that what kind of traffic can come in, what kind of traffic can go out. If you're coming from a certain source going to a certain destination, then only you will be allowed. Otherwise, you will be denied. So since you know the definition, then you think, okay, why do I need this? Well, we need this because in the organizations we have many resources, and not all resources should be accessible by everyone. Right? For example, if you have important HR servers which have some employee employee salaries record or company's revenue records, you don't want that to be accessible by, for example, IT team or simply contractors who are coming to work on your campus for some certain time. So you need to make sure that all resources are not available to everyone. So you need to control who can access what. So once you understand why we need it, then it becomes easier to understand how. And of course, we will have the complete session on access control list, and we'll see how security is configured. So with this approach, we make sure that not only you get the in-depth theory, but you also understand why we are learning this topic, why it is important. And that makes it much easier to learn how. And the how part will take some time because it's the configuration, it's the CLI, it's the commands. So nobody's expecting you to immediately remember everything and do it again. That's why we have the whole week to do the labs. So, and I send you the solution file as well, so that you can always go back and look at the configuration, because it's not a test. So when I teach you something this week and I send you the lab, it's not a test that you need to solve that lab without looking at the solution or by just remembering everything from the session. The idea behind sending you the labs is to reinforce whatever we learn and to strengthen your understanding, knowledge, and the confidence in that particular topic, right? So this course is going to be an 8 weeks course, as I mentioned, the CCNA part. And we are going to go in depth about all the topics which you might see a simulation in the exam, the practical part in the exam. And of course, that's why we will back it up with the multiple practical labs as well. So every week we will have labs, and the way that we are going to go through about this is every session I'm going to start with the particular topic. Like I was saying, for example, let's say we are covering OSPF today, a routing protocol. So I'll explain you everything you need to know about OSPF in the first part, roughly around 1 hour. Again, it's not time driven, so it could be plus or minus, but just to give you a rough idea, the first part of the Zoom session will be about the topic itself, right? That exactly what topic we are covering and the in-depth theory about it, what, why, and how part. And once that part is done, we will have a 5 minutes break in the session, and after coming back, we will do the lab. So when I say we'll do the lab, I am going to do the lab, means I'm going to configure the lab in front of you within the Zoom session, step by step, and I'm going to explain you exactly what I'm doing. So I'm not just going to be sitting here quietly and configuring, and you are watching the configuration. I will be explaining you every single step of the lab, that why did they ask this question, why did we configure it in this way, and how is it going to impact the solution, so that you understand, okay, there are 10 steps or 10 instructions in the lab, and we are doing it in this particular manner for this reason. And you will see this live configuration and the solution and the result of that solution, right? And the same lab I'm going to send you after the session, uh, along with the solution. So this becomes very important, that I also send you the solution of the lab. So for example, just to give you an example, let's say if I'm sending you a spanning tree protocol lab, right? So in the session, I explained you the theory of the STP, exactly how STP work, what, why, and how question, the configuration, and all these things. And then I start this lab, and we start with the instructions. So you can see that the first page has all these instructions, like CCIE style configuration requirements, where you need to configure based on these requirements. Configure manual trunking between the switches, or make sure that switch 1 is the root bridge for VLAN 10, and we need to use certain priority. So for these instructions, I'm going to show you the configuration on the live devices, right? And once we are done with all the configuration and explanation, I'm going to send you this lab. And from the second page onward of this lab, you will see that there is solution. Switch by switch, there is solution of all the steps that were asked into the question, right? So the idea is that anytime when you are doing it on your own, so of course you understood this in the live Zoom session, and then during the week when we don't have the live session, you are doing the lab again. So if you get stuck somewhere, uh, don't test yourself. Don't think that, okay, why don't I remember this from the session? That's not the point. The point is that you understood what is the technology, you understood why we need it. Now the how part will take some time. It will take some practice. So if you get stuck on the commands, on the specific terminology or specific parameters, don't worry. That's a good thing, because that means your brain does not remember that. So it got stuck there. So now you immediately go to the solution and you check what is the configuration that you need to do for that. So your brain will remember it for the next time. Okay, I got stuck here at this point, and I immediately knew the answer because I saw the solution. So next time when I repeat this lab, I will remember that point. So that will strengthen your understanding of the configuration commands as well. And that will come with the repetition, right? You need to repeat doing these labs multiple times. That's why we have the whole week. I would highly recommend to do the labs at least twice every week when I send you. So every week I'll send you one lab, and you're supposed to do it at least one time, but I would recommend to do it at least 2 times, not to cram anything or to just remember anything by heart, but just to have the habit of understanding the question and then solving it, and getting into the habit of doing this. So when in the actual CCNA exam, you see simulations, it becomes very easy, because what we are doing here, the labs that we will do, they are slightly more advanced or complex, I would say, compared to what you will see in the CCNA simulations that you see in the exam. And remember, in the CCNA exam, you have around 5 to 10 simulation questions, depending on which set you get out of total, let's say 65 questions. But the simulation questions carry more weight. So if you think, okay, I'm going to just solve all the multiple choice questions or drag and drop questions, and I'll skip all the simulation questions because there were only 6 of them out of 65 questions. So you are going to fail the exam if you do that, because the simulation questions have more weight, right? That's why the configuration part becomes extremely important. And also, when you are practicing these labs week by week, you are actually learning a lots and lots of concept also about the VLANs or trunking or ether channel, spanning tree protocol, static routing, default routing, OSPF, ACL, network address translation. So when you learn all these things, they also help you in your multiple choice questions in the exam, because anything which is related to subnetting or configuration of static routing, you already know how to do it. You have done it with the configuration labs that we have. So that helps you immensely in the exam with the MCQs or any kind of drag and drop questions as well. That's why we always call it a completely hands-on approach. So although the theory part is very important, and we are going to make sure that you understand what you're doing before you start getting your hands dirty with the configuration. But yes, we will have a lots of configuration as well, much more than the normal CCNA class. So it's a completely hands-on approach, as I mentioned. So now the big question comes is that how exactly are you going to do these configurations or practicals? So how exactly are you going to do the labs? So you will see that for this whole course, we divide this into 2 parts. The first part is the switching part, where you will need the switches for VLAN configuration, trunking configuration, Ether channel configuration, spanning tree protocol, and all these things. And then the second part of the course will be routing, where you will need routers for configuration of routing, configuration of IP services like network address translation, network time protocol, and all these IP services basically. And on the top of that, we also need how to configure security on that routed infrastructure. So that's why for the whole course, we are going to use 2 topologies. So one topology will be the switching topology, as you can see on the screen. So in this topology, we will be using some switches, some access ports going to different computers, and we will place them into different VLANs. And don't worry, in the course, I'm going to explain you exactly what is a VLAN, what is an access port, what is a trunk port, why do we need them, what is the difference between them, why we need different VLANs, why can't we have a single VLAN for everything. So the logic and reasoning of everything will be cleared in the session. So don't worry about that part. But just to give you an example, that once you know all this stuff, that what exactly VLANs, trunking, and switching is, and then we are going to do the labs. So we are going to use this topology. And of course, later when we want to enable communication between different VLANs, like IT department is VLAN 10 and HR department is VLAN 20. So they are not allowed to communicate directly, and they are not supposed to communicate directly. As I was mentioning, maybe you have some confidential information that only supposed to be within the department, so that should not be accessible by other departments directly, right? So they cannot communicate directly, but we can allow controlled communication between them using a gateway or a router. So we'll also see the inter-VLAN routing or inter-VLAN communication. How do we configure using a router on a stick, using a gateway like router 1 in this diagram. So for switching, we are going to use this topology, and we'll stick to the same topology for all the topics. Why? Because it is not a design exam. You don't need to learn a new topology and to understand a new topology for every new lab. We want to concentrate on the topic rather than the design. So that's why we keep the same topology for all the switching topics, right? So whether it is starting with the basics of VLAN configuration with the access ports, or is it trunking configuration, or if it is ether channel or spanning tree protocol, we are going to use the same topology that you see right now for all the topics. Of course, that will actually help you a lot to directly get to the point which is important for you to learn, rather than wasting time to learn a new topology, right? But of course, when it comes to routing, we are going to use another topology, uh, which you see now on the screen. So where we'll be using a few routers connected to each other in different subnets or different networks, so that we can enable communication between different networks. And that's what routing is. Routing is enabling communication between different networks, right? So networking is enabling communication between devices, and routing is enabling communication between different networks. So if the network 10.123.4 here is able to communicate with 10.145 network or 10.156 network and vice versa, then yes, you have the routing properly configured. So all the routing configuration, whether it is static routing, default routing, or any routing protocols, we are going to do it on this topology. And again, for all the routing requirements, for the IP services, for security configuration, we are going to stick to the same topology as you see right now, so that we don't waste much time into learning new design every single time, right? Instead, we can concentrate on the topic in hand and we can use it. So the question is that what method are we using, or what tool are we using to access these devices, right? So what we are going to use is we are going to use a tool which is called ENG, which is basically a emulator. So there's a difference here. It's not a simulator. So the simulator is a software which actually simulates the real device. So it mimics the real device, but it is not the real device. So it will actually show you the outputs or the commands as if it's the real device, but it doesn't support everything because it's not actually the real device, right? Emulator, on the other hand, like ENG, they are just the front end. They actually need the real operating system images of the routers and switches in the back end. So they only provide you the front end. So instead of having a hardware, like if you purchase a switch or a router, you can see the hardware. But when you connect to the router or switch, ultimately you will end up with a CLI, right? A command line interface screen where you can access the operating system of that router or the switch. So here the ENG is just getting rid of the hardware part. So you can directly gain access to the real operating system of the router and the real operating system of the switch in the backend. And that's the beauty of ENG, because that means you have all the commands that you would see, or all the tools that you see on the real router or the switch, because it is actually the real router or the switch image in the backend. It is just emulating the hardware part into a virtualized environment. So the benefit of this is that you can create multiple routers topology or multiple switches topology, like I just showed you a couple of topologies, and you don't need much resources for those, and you don't need much investment for that. Instead, if you have to purchase, for example, in this case, I can see 6 routers here and 1 switch. And if I'm using this second topology, I need 3 more switches here. I will need 4 computers and 1 more router. So that can become a significant investment if you are going to create a physical topology, right? And in the real world, unless you are a field engineer, you don't need to actually deal with the hardware at all. Most of the time, you are dealing with a screen where you have a CLI or a GUI, and you have to configure, you have to troubleshoot, you have to tweak, you have to tune the configurations. You deal with the configuration part. So what ENG does, it actually helps you to emulate everything and create these topologies. Now, ENG is just a tool, right? So what happens is that if you go to the evng.net, you can download it for free. It's just an emulator, but it's an empty shell. So if you do it on your own, you will see that there are many issues before you can get to the CCNA practice. For example, you will need to somehow acquire the the Cisco routers and switches operating system images, and then ENG is actually based on Linux. So you need to somehow then copy those acquired images into the backend Linux. And once they are copied, you need to use some Linux commands to license them. And once they are licensed, then you need to open the GUI of ENG and it will be completely blank. So you'll have to start thinking, okay, how do I connect routers and switches in a way that I can practice all the topics of the CCNA blueprint. So you can see there are a lot of steps before you can get to the point where you can start configuring things and start working on the topics which are important for CCNA, right? So we wanted to make sure that we get rid of all these hurdles for you, and you don't need to waste time into all these research of how ENG is set up and acquiring these images, licensing them, creating topologies. So instead, we have already done all these things. So I have already created an ENG based solution where we have all the routers and switches images copied, already licensed, and we have already created these topologies which I just showed you, the routing and switching topologies. So these topologies are pre-built now, and all these things I have compiled into an OVA file. So the Dropbox link that I sent you guys earlier, that link actually is to download the OVA file on your local computer. And once you download that OVA file, you can import this into VMware Workstation. So I would recommend you to use the Windows machine because that is the most stable for this implementation. But in case if you have a Apple machine like a MacBook, then I would recommend to use at least the Intel-based MacBooks because the M series MacBooks they don't support ENG because the new M series processors they only support ARM-based architecture and ENG is still on the x86 based architecture. So I would recommend to use a Windows machine, or if you don't have a Windows machine and you only have MacBook like M series machines, I would recommend you to actually maybe invest a couple of $100 for like a second-hand uh, desktop PC from Amazon, very cheap. And because you don't need very powerful processor for this, what you need is a little bit more memory. And if you go with 16 gig or 32 gig RAM, you are covered all the way up to CCIE. So all because if you are going for CCNA and then you are planning to do CCNP and CCIE in future, you will be future proof that with that machine. But let's say if you already have a laptop with the 8 gig or 16 gig RAM with Windows operating system, then you're already good for this as well. You can directly start using this, at least for CCN and CCNP, that will be more than sufficient, right? So the ENG OVA that I sent you, once you download it, and then when you open the VMware Workstation Player. By the way, VMware has been taken over by Broadcom. So if you go to the website, it's a mess right now. It's not very easy to find where exactly you can go on the website to download the VMware Workstation Player, which is the free version of Workstation. So in case if you have any issue in installing VMware Workstation or any issue acquiring it or finding it, then let me know also. I will send you a Dropbox link so you can download it from our in-house Dropbox database. So we have the VMware Vacation software also. So you can download it from there. I think it is version 17, which is more than sufficient for all the practicals. And then you can install it from there. But yeah, the first step you need to do on your laptop, and because this today we just have the introduction, so you have this whole week to set everything up. So the first thing you should do is to install the VMware workstation on your Windows machine, right? And once you are ready with your VMware, then you can import the OVA into the VMware. So how do you do that? So let's say if you go to the VMware, once you install it and you open it, it will open something like this. The interface is like this for VMware workstation. So once you have this ready, then you can go to the player file and basically open, or you can also press Ctrl plus O to open the OVA file. You need to import it by using the keyword open. So when you go on the open, and then you will see that the OVA file will be showing you something like this for CCNA, and you can just double click on it or you can click on open, and then it will start importing the file. So when it starts importing, it will ask you to give it a name. You can give it like CCNA lab or whatever you like to give it, like CCNA course or something, and let it be imported completely. Once it is imported by just clicking on it and giving it a name, you will see that it will show up like something like this, like a particular name. Like for example, here we have programmability or other different names. So you can actually click on a particular keyword, and then you can go to the properties to set things up for that. For example, I imported this one, although you can see it is the example for Linux OVA, but it will work the same way for CCNA OVA as well. So when you click on that, let's say you have given it a name CCNA lab, right? So when you click on it once, on the right hand side, it will show you to edit virtual machine settings and basically to play the virtual machine. What exactly do you want to do? So here you just need to make sure that you go to the edit virtual machine setting and adjust the memory according to your requirement. How much RAM do you want to give? So if you have 16 gig of RAM in your laptop or desktop PC, you can give 8 gig to the ENG. But if you only have 8 gig, then you can give up to 6 gig to ENG as well. So don't worry, when you assign 6 gigabit to ENG, it's not going to hog all the memory immediately. It is going to start using it gradually when you start using more and more devices. So it's not going to completely block 6 gig of RAM, but it can be a good idea to give at least 6 gig of RAM for this CCNA course. And also then next thing you need to make sure is the network adapter is set to network address translation. And this is very important because you will see that the ENG we are going to use is in the browser. So everything is in the GUI, graphical user interface. I'll show you the interface and everything. So you go to the GUI and you start using an IP address to open it into the browser. So how do you know that IP address? You need to make sure that the network adapter is set to net, and then you click on OK, and then you can click on play the virtual machine and let the virtual machine boot. So this is your ENG booting, right? So once you import it, you set the RAM according to your requirement and set the network adapter to net, and you boot the machine, then you will actually get to something like this. So just to give you an example, it will actually take you to this page where it shows you that this is ENG and this is the IP address, and then it shows you the login screen. You don't need to log in here. This is the backend of ENG. That means the Linux operating system, which is used for the maintenance purpose, right? To copy the images, license them, and other things using the Linux commands. So since the OVA that I sent you is pre-compiled, it has everything already. So you don't need to log in here. Then why did we come here? Because we wanted to note down the IP address here. We need to open this IP into one of your choice of the browser, right? Like Google Chrome or Firefox or whatever the browser you're using. So the idea is we need to access the GUI of the ENG using this IP address. Now, in your case, the IP may be different. And remember that if you don't see an IP here, that means you did not select the network adapter to be of the type NAT, right? When we went to the virtual machine settings, and I showed you the network adapter first one. If you see two network adapters, I am talking about the first one. Make sure it is set to NET, and then reboot the VMware, and then you will see an IP address here. Some IP address will be there, and all you need to do is to note down this IP, and you need to open this into a browser to access the topologies. So we just open this in the browser and the topology will be accessible to you, right? So that's the logic, or that's how we are going to use the devices and or the topologies, and then we'll use it to configure our every week's labs that I'm going to send you, right? Also, one more thing is that whatever we are going to cover into these live Zoom sessions, these are going to be recorded. So you will have the access to the class recording for the lifetime. So one of the benefit of this is that if you want to go back to the session and want to see what exactly was taught, you can actually always come back to the recordings. Even let's say after a few months, you want to refresh your OSPF knowledge, well, you have the access. What about after 5 years? You still have the access, right? Because it's lifetime access. Also, if there is any change into the CCNA exam, if they come up with some new topics or remove some old topics, we are going to update our recordings accordingly, and you will always have the access to the latest CCNA curriculum or CCNA blueprint. So that is another very useful thing that you have in this course, a very unique thing also for the lifetime recording access to the recordings. One thing I do want to mention though is that we have many accelerated courses already finished with CCNA. So the recordings that you see might not be from this class. So let's say if we go through spanning tree protocol this week, and then you want to watch the recording. So when you go to the recording, it might be from one of the previous CCNA accelerated class, but it's the same lab, same topic, and same discussion. It's just that from one of the previous classes, because every accelerated class we have the same topics, so we don't want to keep multiple copies of the same thing repeated. So that's why you might see it from the earlier class, but the topics will be same, the labs will be same. So you will not see anything different in that sense, right? It just be a different class recording. It might be a different class recording, right? One last thing about this course structure is that, okay, so we have the in-depth theory, we have the multiple labs, we have the ENG support so that you can do it on your own, and we have the lifetime access to the class recordings. But what about if you have doubts? How exactly should you approach those doubts? Like if you have some questions or you get stuck somewhere, is there going to be any help for that? So the first thing is that I send you the solution file uh, along with the lab. So you can always look at the solution file if you get stuck. As I mentioned earlier, you should have the mindset of learning even when you are doing the lab on your own. Don't have a mindset of testing yourself, right? The test will come only when you go for the CCN exam. Before that, everything is learning, right? So always look at the solution file. if the solution file doesn't make any sense, or if you think that I don't understand why the solution is like this, then you can always, step two, you can always go to the recordings. So when you watch the recording, because every session I'm going to configure the lab step by step, explaining everything and then configuring it. So maybe it will be clear once you watch the recording again. But if that is also not clear, and that's why you have the whole week in the middle, then you can actually use our special Facebook group, which is created just for the Q&A purpose, right? So we have a Facebook group for question and answers and support. So if you join this Facebook group, you will be able to ask detailed questions there. You can take screenshots or the configuration copies. You can ask very detailed question there, and I will be answering there. Or some other students are also there which are already on the CCNP level or CCI level. They can also chip in. They can answer you. I will be answering you there as well. And of course, if other students see your question and my answer or other students answer, they can also benefit from that. So it's a great community for asking questions and getting answers for your doubts, right? But in case if you don't have Facebook, or you are at some certain situation where you can't use Facebook at that day or that time, you can definitely ask the questions below the recordings also. So when you're watching the recording again, you will see that below every recording, there will be a comment section where you can type your question, and that also comes directly to me. You can ask questions there. That's the second method. Third method of contacting me is, of course, you can send me an email. And if you have a detailed question with the screenshots or some configuration that you want to show me, the email would be a better choice rather than asking it into the live session. So in the live sessions also, that's the fourth option. After completing the session every week, I'm going to ask you, do you have any questions or any confusions or any doubts that you need to clear from this week or from the previous weeks? So you can ask questions there as well. But in the live Zoom session, we have limited time. So if you have quick questions or quick doubts, you can solve it there. But if you have to show me some configuration mistakes, or why neighborship is not coming up, or why HTTP is not working in this way, or you want to show me some screenshots, the better method would be the Facebook group, so that you can ask the detailed questions and I can answer you also after proper checking in the detailed manner, right? Similarly, you can ask it on the email also, and we can take it there. But the classroom Q&A or the Zoom session Q&A is limited to some quick questions or more theoretical questions rather than configuration questions, because that can take more time and may need a little bit more explanation. That is much better suited for Facebook or the email, right? So ENG, as I already mentioned, it is on VMware, and topology is already pre-built into the ENG. So all you need to import the OVA and set the RAM according to your requirement, and make sure you set the network adapter to NAT, right? So once you're done with this, you can boot it, and then you're good to go for the CCNA class. Now, speaking of the CCNA topics, what topics are we going to cover? So first of all, we are going to cover all the practical topics of the CCNA blueprint. And then for all the theoretical topics, like if there are some topics which they are not going to ask you any simulation, so you don't need a lab for that, right? For example, you do have some wireless also in CCNA, wireless introduction, but there is no simulation lab for wireless on the CCNA level. So you need to know the theory, you need to know the logic or concept, but you don't need to do the lab on wireless. But on the other hand, if we are talking about network address translation or NAT, yes, you do need to not only understand the topic, but also need to be able to configure static NAT or dynamic NAT or NAT overload, which is called port address translation. So we will have extensive labs on that part. So in these 8 weeks, which is the live part of the session, live part of the CCNA class, we are going to cover all the topics which need the hands-on, which need to have the configuration as well, apart from the theory part. And after these 8 weeks are finished, we will open some bonus videos for you on the recording portal, so that you can watch those videos for the theoretical part of the exam, some of the topics which you will not need any lab, and that's why you don't need a live session to see the lab configuration and the implementation part of it. But yeah, for overall, if you see the CCNA topics, the practical topics we have, we will start with IPv4 addressing and subnetting next week. Although it is a theoretical topic, means you don't have any configuration on the router or a switch, but it is extremely important. And we will have a subnetting lab for this, because subnetting, you will definitely have few subnetting questions in the exam. And subnetting is a skill that will help you a lot later also in when you are doing CCNP, or later when you are going for CCIE as well, right? Then we are going to cover the switching topics, VLANs, VTP, Ether channel, spanning tree protocol. We are also going to cover routing basic configuration and secure shell access to the router. And then we'll move to the routing part. So in routing, we are understand static and default routing, how exactly it is configured. And in the routing protocols, we are going to cover OSPF or OSPF version 2, which is used for IPv4. So earlier in CCNA, you had RIP, EIGRP also. RIP and EIGRP are the slightly older protocols. RIP is actually a very, very limited protocol. EIGRP is Cisco proprietary. So Cisco actually have removed these topics now from the CCNA blueprint. So you don't need it for the exam. But because you have joined our accelerated course, you also have the access to the recordings of our regular course, right? Which is the 20 weeks slow CCNA course, where I do have some recordings for RIP and EIGRP as well from the previous classes. So if you are interested into those routing protocols and just want to learn out of curiosity, you can go and watch those recordings as well. But it's not needed for the CCNA exam. In CCNA, you only have OSPF for the routing protocol part. We are also going to understand IPv6 addressing, and we'll do a lot of configuration of IPv6 and see how exactly it works and what is the difference between IPv4 and IPv6, the structure, the types, and the methods of configuring IPv6 addressing. All these will be covered as well. We'll also cover a lot of IP services. So we'll see there are a lot of services like network address translation, network time protocol, DSCP, which is used to assign IP addresses to the devices, or DNS, which is used to resolve names to IP addresses. So all these extra services, which only work if your routing is already configured, right? If your reachability is already there, then only your services will work. So we are going to discuss and understand these services as well. And of course, we'll also understand the very important part of the exam, and you will definitely see some simulation on this in the exam, which is security features like access control list, or on the layer 3 level, or on layer 2 level, we have IP source guard, dynamic ARP inspection, or DSCP snooping, all these switching features which are used for security of your network. Port security, which is very important for switching as well, to make sure that only authorized devices are allowed to connect to your network using your switch. So port security is generally your first line of defense, basically against any kind of potential attacks, right, from unauthorized or malicious users. So we are going to learn all these security features, of course, along with the labs. So anything you see in this list, we are definitely going to do some labs on these things as well. But then after this, we'll open some bonus topics for you, where bonus in the sense that they don't need the lab configuration, but you do need to understand some basic idea about them, just the introduction. So for example, we are going to have some videos for you for wireless, like how exactly wireless work, what are the logic of lightweight access point, what is wireless LAN controller, WLC, how does WLC connects to the wireless access point, and how many different ways are there. But you will not see any simulation in the exam, just a theoretical or multiple choice questions on this. Same thing for virtualization. What exactly virtualization is, how does it work, what is the difference between level 1 versus level 2 hypervisors, and what are the examples of hypervisor, like VMware is one of the hypervisor, right? But then we also have Linux KVM, or Microsoft hypervisor as well, or we also have VirtualBox. So what are the differences between these virtualization techniques, right? And also, we are going to understand the importance of automation and programmability. So you will see that when you go for CCNP and later for CCIE, we will have some practicals also on these. But on the CCNA level, they are not going to ask you any simulation question on this. But you need to understand what is automation and what is programmability. So programmability basically means the capability of programming your devices or configuring your devices from a central location. So you take a central location, and then you use something called APIs, application programming interfaces, to make API calls to the devices so that you can program them from a central location. You don't need to log in multiple devices separately. You can do it from a central location. But then if you have a lot of programmability to be done, you can automate it as well. So you can use programs like Python, or some other coding structure like Cisco's in-house EEM, embedded event management, to actually automate the whole programmability process, which can help you a lot to configure things to multiple devices within few configuration commands or configuration steps. So we are going to understand these topics as well. Of course, there will be no lab for this because on the CCNA level, you don't need it. But of course, when you go for CCNP and CCIE, we will have a lot of labs on these topics as well, because there you will need the practical exposure as well. So talking about the CCNA exam, exactly what is this exam and how many questions are there? What is the structure of the exam? So you'll see that the current exam is called version 1.1, so 200-301, and the latest version is 1.1. And if it changes, let's say we are going through our course, and if there is something changes in the course, we are going to incorporate the new information or update in the live exam or the live sessions as. And of course, if something changes later also, as I mentioned already, we will update our recordings accordingly as well. So this exam is actually a 2-hour exam, 120 minutes. So if you are a non-native English speaker or from a country from a non-native English speaking, like from Germany or Japan or India, you get 30 extra minutes also. But if you are from UK, USA, you get only 2 hours or 120 minutes. And the type of questions that you get are multiple choice questions, drag and drops question, table matching. Most of these are theoretical questions, but simulations are the configuration. So in simulations, they will actually show you a diagram. There will be a problem statement, and then you will need to click on the devices on the diagram, which will open the terminal session where you can type the commands, show commands to see the configuration, or even configuration commands to change the configuration according to the requirement of the question. So these simulations will be similar to what we will do every week here in this course, the labs that I'm going to send you. And as I was mentioning, our labs are actually slightly more advanced than what you will see in the simulation, more configuration than what you will see in the simulation. So you will be basically over prepared for this part. So it will become very comfortable for you to do the simulation part, which becomes the most challenging for many students who go for the CCNA exam, right? So in these 2 hours, 120 minutes, you will get 50 to 60 questions depending on which set you get. And the number of simulations will be much less out of these 50 questions. You will see maybe 5 to 7 simulations in the exam. But of course, the exam is weighted. So you have more weight for the simulation questions. They carry more points. So it's very difficult to pass the exam if you skip all the simulation questions, right? Because they have much more marking compared to the multiple choice questions that you have, right? So that's it from my side. I just wanted to introduce you today about the structure of this course, how exactly we are going to go about, what can you expect from this course. And what is expected from your side is just to show up every week, make sure that you join the live session, do the labs, watch the recordings and do the labs again. Make sure you do it a couple of times at least and ask questions. As many questions you want to ask, you are welcome. And basically just upgrade yourself with the new knowledge that you are going to learn. So that is what is expected from your side, just the consistency and making sure that you are following the labs week by week so that the work doesn't pile up for you later, right? A little bit of introduction about myself. My name is Arpit Pandit, and as I mentioned, I have more than 18 years of experience. So I started with Microsoft actually, and earlier I used to teach Microsoft back in 2006, 2007, I would say. And then I moved to CCNA, CCNP, and then I did my first CCIE in routing and switching, and then I did my second CCIE in service provider. So I have two CCIEs, and apart from training, I also work as a consultant, network consultant with some certain organizations. So mostly I am attached with the projects where I need to provide my insights about the back end of the network, where mostly it is Juniper devices, and sometimes in the front end also where there are Cisco devices or SD-WAN devices, software defined networking WAN. So it could be Juniper SD-WAN or Cisco Viptela SD-WAN. It could be Cisco Meraki SD-WAN as well. Although with Meraki, I don't have much exposure, to be honest. I didn't do much projects on that, but Cisco Viptela SD-WAN, I have done extensive projects as well. And some other Silver Peak is there, which I also managed, and there are some certain firewall implementations as well that I always do now and then. So that practical knowledge also helps me to include that information every now and then in our classes, right? Which helps our student. And although it's a cliche, but training is a passion for me and for Christian also. So nothing makes me more happy than explaining a complex topic to someone and then they say, okay, yeah, now finally now I get it and now it makes more sense. So that actually makes me very happy. So that's why you can call me a geek about that, about the training part, right? So yeah, that's it from my side. So welcome again, guys, and let me know if you have any questions. So from next week, we are going to start with IP addressing and subnetting. So I would say you do have a couple of weeks, this week and the next week, because next week we will not use the ENG, we will just have the subnetting lab. So you do have this week and the next week to set up everything. So make sure that you do that. And in case if you face any issue in setting up ENG, or if you see any error or any problem, feel free to contact me and we can set up a session to make sure everything is working smoothly before we get to the actual configuration lab that time, right? So thanks, Wednesday. Thanks, James. Thanks, Phil. Let me know if you have any questions.
I think it's good for this week. Thanks, though.
All right, thanks. So if any other question later also comes to your mind, feel free to send me an email asking any questions you might have. So happy New Year, guys, to you and your family, and I'll see you next week.
Take care.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.